the ruthless enforcers of Palpatine's will, marching in perfect formation like an unstoppable machine. But the second you actually watch them fight, the illusion cracks. These guys could not hit the side of a bantha if it was chained down in front of them. They are less terrifying soldiers and more like background extras waiting for their cue to fall over. Think about it. Han Solo runs around a hallway screaming at the top of his lungs, and an entire squad of stormtroopers just turns and runs away like they saw a mouse. Luke and Leia swing across a bottomless pit, and the stormtroopers fire 1,000 shots and miss every single one. You cannot tell me this is the elite force holding the galaxy hostage. That is not military discipline. That is a blooper reel. And then you get to Endor. The Emperor's finest legion, his hand-picked elite, deployed to guard the Death Star shield generator. And what happens? They get outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and absolutely humiliated by teddy bears with sticks and rocks. Ewoks crush armoured walkers with logs, tie soldiers up with ropes, and basically treat stormtroopers like toys in a backyard wrestling match. This is supposed to be the peak of Imperial strength. Instead, it looks like amateur hour in the forest. The armour makes it even worse. It looks sleek and intimidating, sure, but what does it actually do? It cannot stop blaster bolts. It cannot stop rocks. It cannot even stop doorways from knocking them unconscious. The most effective use of stormtrooper armour is apparently Halloween costumes, because on the battlefield it is just plastic waiting to be shattered. Intimidation only works until someone calls the bluff, and the rebels called it every single time. And yet stormtroopers are everywhere. They are the posters, the propaganda, the symbol of the Empire's power. The whole system runs on the image of strength, not the reality of it, which is hilarious when you realise their most useful skill is dying on cue. The Empire built an army of faceless nobodies to scare people into submission, and it almost worked. Almost. In this video, we are going to dig into why stormtroopers were such a massive downgrade from the clones, how their failures reveal the truth about the Empire's weakness, why their incompetence became one of the longest-running jokes in Star Wars history, and why the scariest thing about them was never their aim, but the illusion they created until the day that illusion finally broke. Stormtroopers were supposed to be the face of Imperial dominance, the faceless wall of white armour marching through corridors and striking fear across the galaxy. But once you really start watching them in action, the curiosity hits. Because despite all the propaganda, they might just be the least effective soldiers in Star Wars. Their very first appearance in A New Hope makes them look formidable. They storm the Tantive A4 and wipe out a squad of rebels without breaking a sweat. But after that, it is all downhill. They cannot stop two droids waddling through a desert. They miss every shot fired at Luke and Leia, and they get tricked by Han Solo running around shouting like a maniac. How exactly is this the galaxy's ultimate fighting force? Then comes the obvious comparison to clones. The Republic's army was disciplined, tactical, and effective enough to fight the Separatists across hundreds of systems. Stormtroopers, on the other hand, look like a blurry photocopy of greatness. The armour is the same, the numbers are bigger, but the skill is completely gone. Why downgrade when the clones were working so well? Even the armour raises questions. It is advertised as protective, yet a single blaster bolt drops them instantly. It cannot stop rocks, sticks, or even tree trunks rolled by teddy bears. The only thing the armour seems to protect them from is individuality. And even that fails once you remember stormtroopers constantly take their helmets off in canon. That is what makes stormtroopers fascinating. They were designed to project fear, not to embody effectiveness. Which begs the question, why did the Empire depend so heavily on such an incompetent army? The more you look at it, the more frustrating it gets. Because stormtroopers should have been terrifying, but instead they are a punchline. Their incompetence undercuts the Empire's image, and it makes you wonder how Palpatine's regime lasted more than a week. Let's start with the obvious. Their aim. Stormtroopers are the poster children for bad marksmanship. They fire thousands of rounds across the trilogy and maybe hit 2 or 3 minor characters. Meanwhile, our heroes casually wipe them out with barely any effort. Watching them shoot is less tense action and more comedy skit. Their biggest failure has to be Endor. The Emperor's finest legion is deployed to guard the Death Star's shield generator, and they lose to teddy bears. Ewoks, with rocks, ropes, and swinging logs, humiliate the Empire's best troops. If you replaced Ewoks with trained soldiers, maybe you could excuse it. But losing to stuffed animals with wooden sticks is beyond frustrating. Their discipline is equally laughable. They get tricked by Luke and Han in disguise, they panic when ambushed, and they scatter the second something goes wrong. Half the time, they look like mall cops at closing time, rather than elite soldiers of a galactic empire. That is why Stormtroopers are frustrating. They look intimidating, but the second you put them in a real fight, they crumble into the galaxy's biggest joke. Beneath all the memes and frustration, though, there is sorrow in the Stormtrooper story, because behind every faceless helmet is a person, and those people were not trained to be heroes. They were moulded to be disposable. The clones before them had individuality, brotherhood, and skill. Stormtroopers were stripped of that. Many were conscripts or recruits forced into service, robbed of choice, and dumped into identical armour. They were soldiers not because they wanted to fight, but because the Empire needed bodies in the field. That is a tragedy in itself. Even their failures are a result of being expendable. The Empire never invested in their training or equipment because fear was more useful than efficiency. Stormtroopers were walking propaganda. Their armour made them look unified. Their numbers made them look endless. But in reality, they were cannon fodder, meant to terrify civilians, not defeat real enemies. By the time of the sequels, nothing had changed. Finn's backstory in The Force Awakens shows us that Stormtroopers were still indoctrinated from birth, turned into soldiers without choice. His defection proves how little humanity the system allowed. That sorrow adds a chilling weight to every faceless trooper we see fall in battle. So yes, Stormtroopers are incompetent. But the deeper sorrow is that they were designed that way. Not to be effective, but to be expendable tools of an empire that never valued their lives. And yet, despite all their flaws, there is awe in the Stormtroopers' image. Because Star Wars knew exactly what it was doing. Even if they failed on the battlefield, Stormtroopers worked perfectly as symbols of tyranny. Their design alone is unforgettable. The sight of white armour marching in unison through the corridors of the Death Star is chilling. Rows of identical helmets moving as one, faceless and dehumanized, projecting an aura of unstoppable power. That spectacle is awe-inspiring, even when we know the truth underneath. The design itself is iconic. Ralph McQuarrie's original art gave Stormtroopers a sleek, skull-like menace that became instantly recognizable. To this day, their silhouette is one of the most famous in cinema. They may be incompetent soldiers, but as cultural symbols they are unmatched. And the sound design enhances the awe. The click of boots, the hiss of blasters, the crackle of radio chatter through their helmets. Even if they are falling over in battle, those audio cues still send a chill through audiences. The Empire's genius was not building effective soldiers, but building the illusion of them. That is the awe of Stormtroopers. They may fail constantly, but visually and symbolically, they embody the fear and control of the Empire in ways no other force ever could. Even with all their failures, Stormtroopers carry a strange kind of hope, because every time one of them misses a shot, every time they trip over themselves, it reminds us that the Empire is not invincible. Its soldiers are not gods, they are just people in suits, and that means they can be beaten. The rebels never stood a chance against the Empire's fleet or weapons, but they could take on Stormtroopers, and that gave them hope. From Luke and Han disguising themselves in armour to Ewoks using primitive traps, every victory against Stormtroopers proved the Empire could bleed. That was crucial for keeping the rebellion alive. Even Finn represents hope. His defection in The Force Awakens shows that Stormtroopers are not mindless machines. They are human beings who can make choices. His story proves that even someone raised in indoctrination can break free, and that hope resonates beyond the galaxy, far, far away. And there is hope in how Stormtroopers remain iconic despite their failures. Kids wear the costumes, fans celebrate them, and they live on as reminders that even flawed symbols can inspire something greater. Their presence in Star Wars continues to fuel debates, discussions, and endless jokes. That in itself is a hopeful legacy. So while Stormtroopers may be bad at their jobs, their story still carries hope, because they remind us that fear is only powerful until someone decides not to be afraid anymore. But at the end of it all, the resolution is tragic, because Stormtroopers were never meant to be soldiers. They were meant to be masks. Masks for an empire that relied on intimidation instead of effectiveness, fear instead of strength. And in that sense, their failure was inevitable. The tragedy is that behind every joke about their bad aim is the truth of wasted lives. Recruits stripped of individuality, thrown into a system that valued their appearance more than their humanity. Their incompetence was not their fault, it was engineered. And that makes their story less funny and more haunting. Their downfall is inevitable because the Empire built them as symbols rather than warriors. Symbols crack when exposed, and Stormtroopers cracked the moment they were tested by real resistance. The rebellion's victories prove that masks cannot win wars, only people can. And yet Stormtroopers remain etched in history. Their failures define them, but so does their image. They are both tragic and iconic, failures on the battlefield but legends in cinema. That contradiction is why we still talk about them decades later. So yes, Stormtroopers were the worst soldiers in the Empire. But that is exactly the point. Because their failure reveals the truth about the Empire itself. Power built on fear always looks strong, until the moment someone decides to fight back.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.